if I understand what you're asking me correctly, if I understand it right, you're asking about like how to get your mind around the idea of like being able to barter and do things, engage in commerce, engage in being able to like function in the real world. Well, let's first of all, I'm gonna back you up a tiny bit. We have to define what exactly is the real world. I'm not talking about the fucking Matrix or anything. No. Okay, we're not talking about some existential shit. Okay, we're talking about what have you been shown is the so-called real world. Most people go through their life kind of on autopilot, right? They're like, oh, I want, we're out of eggs. Quick, run down to the store and grab some eggs, right? That's sort of how we operate. We get on kind of an autopilot kind of mentality, as opposed to going, what if you had an economy where, well, like that didn't exist, and you're like, oh, we're out of eggs. Uh-oh. Well, we need to not let that happen in the future. How many more chickens do we need to have so that we don't run out of eggs? You understand? Like this is tricky to answer this question, because you're right. A lot of people don't know how to really function. They don't understand the idea behind money. Transactions today are just quick and easy, right? They're all the time. There's zillions of transactions. We do 50, 60 of them a day, and we don't even think twice about it, right? Yeah, that's the part that needs to stop. That's the part that in a real economy, with a real currency, people don't just transact 50 times a day. They think before they act, because it's not as easy to replace that income or that money, right? It becomes very difficult to make money, which is good. That's a good thing. It becomes very difficult to make money, and especially if your money isn't losing any value, right? That's important. It's not losing its purchasing power. If it doesn't lose its purchasing power and it's difficult to get a hold of, that's good, because that means that your savings is going to actually be worth something. So when you do save, it's actually going to have real spending power later on. You don't need to have any gimmicks. You don't need to have to try and make a return on your money. You don't need to make a return on your money if your money isn't devalued. You understand? So, this is just how this works. So what has to happen is people have to change the way that they think about just transacting on the fly, right? The drive-through window idea of transacting, that's a transaction, and it's a mindless transaction, as opposed to going, hold on, I'm hungry. Am I really hungry for that? Or am I actually just hungry and I probably should go home and make something, right? This is, in other words, it's sort of think of it the way that the Amish think of it. I'm not telling people to go Amish. I'm not saying that. I'm not telling you to, just say screw electricity or anything. Now, especially when it's down this hot. I mean, I'm in Houston, man. It's freaking hot out here. Okay, so I mean, I like AC and so on. I think these are great things, and they're things that have actually helped us to live much longer lives, that are much better lives too. It really has actually done that. I can't remember. I looked it up one time. Something like only a small percentage of the world's population has air conditioning, when you think of it on a global level, right? So it's really kind of a big deal that you have central AC in your house, even if it's a small house. It's a kind of a big deal because most people don't have that. So it's a matter of changing the way that we think about transactions. Instead of doing mindless transactions, we do transactions that are deliberate. And what that means is that you don't just run out of eggs. You start to think long term. Now, one of the side effects of thinking long term is that it becomes one of these things where you start really thinking. And this is exactly what the government, the bankers, your bankers, your governments, your big corporations, they don't want you to start thinking long term. If you start thinking long term, you're not going to spend now. You understand? Okay, I mean, I'm talking to young people on this one in particular. Okay, so you younger folks out there, if you start thinking long term, let me define long term for you, because some of you don't even understand what I mean by that. I'm not talking about, oh hey, it's Sunday and I'm already thinking about Thursday. Yeah, that's not long term. Okay. I'm talking about long-term as in you're thinking about what your adult grandchildren, the world in which they're going to live. That's the kind of long-term thinking I'm talking about. And once people start thinking like that, that becomes very destructive to bankers, governments, and big corporations who need you to constantly be churning and burning. They need to constantly have you doing stuff within their system and constantly staying busy, because as soon as you start thinking long-term, you're not going to just go to that drive-through window anymore. That's not going to happen. You're not just going to, just spend money willy-nilly. You're not just going to buy some, little weird odds and ends and, baubles and shit like that. You're not going to do that. You're going to start thinking like, oh, well, hold on. I actually need to have like land, for starters, a place on which that I can stand, that I own, right? I'll go into a concept of ownership video later on. And then I have to have a dwelling to live in, and then, maybe central air conditioning. Oh, wouldn't that be awesome? Anyway, so you kind of see where I'm going with this. You start thinking long term. And men are better at this than women. It's the truth. Men tend to be better at this than women early on, right? Now, women get better at it when they get older. When women get older, they get into they're traditionally in their 30s, 40s, 50s. Then they start seeing it the same way. They start looking at it going, oh, hold on. That's when they traditionally would start telling their daughters and granddaughters the truth and not, filling their heads full of nonsense. They would start telling them the truth. Like, hey, hold on. The decisions you make now when you're like 19 can have drastic repercussions in the future. Like super drastic repercussions. We're seeing that play. Gen X women, in fact, are watching that play out with Zoomers. They're seeing it. I'm seeing more and more Gen X women that are bringing this up, going, "Oh my God, no one told me this. I'm trying to this is exactly what happens, right?" So women get better at it later on and stuff, but men are pretty good at it in early on because they have to start thinking a little bit long term. So the better you get at doing that, it changes. I'm answering your question, but it changes the way you think of transactions, and you stop thinking in terms of, okay, can I afford the car? Or can I afford the car payment? Big difference. Big difference. A lot of people cannot afford the car that they have purchased. They can afford the car payment, right? Most people, most in this country cannot afford the house that they are in. I guarantee you. Dude, I'm in contracting. I guarantee you most people cannot afford the house they're in. I look at the state of disrepair with all those big, beautiful houses that you drive past, and they're like, oh my God, that house is $2 million, and it's 8,300 square feet and shit like that. I see those houses up close and personal, and I will tell you that most of the people don't maintain those houses the way that they're supposed to be doing it. They don't have the money for that. If they did, they would not buy that house. They can afford the house payment. They can't actually afford the house. They had no business buying that house. Okay? I'm not telling you to live in a box. I'm not telling you to live in a trailer somewhere. I'm not saying that. I'm pointing out that people think differently when they are able to think long term. And they stop thinking about, can I afford the monthly payment and the interest? Because there's no way to pay interest. Bankers create principal. They don't create interest. Which means there is no way to ever pay any of this off, which is why it's why you're seeing all this shit fall apart. It's because there's no way to pay any of this off. And that's just how this goes. So I hope that helps, but that really is the way to start thinking about this stuff, is, getting past the quick and easy transactions. And we're all guilty of that. I'm not some paragon of morality explaining this. I'm not even a moral person. I make no claims to be so. I'm just pointing out that it's much easier to think of it like that when your currency isn't completely debased bullshit like the US dollar.